The Recreational Opportunity Spectrum, ROS, is the premier land management tool used by the Forest Service, BLM, and more recently, the National Park Service. In their classic 1979 monograph, Clark and Stankey explain the recreational opportunity spectrum as a framework for planning, management, and research of outdoor resources. The monograph explains the creation of the ROS system. It is worth reading from a historical perspective. The Kachess Effect, the topic of this video, pays tribute to their monograph and builds upon it. In the preface of their monograph, they tell the story of the damming of the Kachess River to form Lake Kachee and its transformation from a primitive area into the developed recreational area with modern convenience. The Kachess Effect describes this process and recommends the use of the ROS to limit unfettered development and to design the experience. Clark and Stankey noted that in the 1890s, human impacts were virtually non-existent. Only a few people entered the area for recreational activities. Hunters and a few trappers were known to use the area on occasion. The Kachess area offered a true wilderness opportunity for those wishing to use it. In the early 1900s, BLM built 3 dams to support agricultural needs. 11 miles long, Lake Kachee was one of the impoundments. Clark and Stankey note that for the next several decades, the road system used for building the dam and for logging was expanded, facilitating access to recreational opportunities. Evidence of use became obvious as people camped and played alongside the lake shore and several streams that emptied into the recently completed lake. The primeval conditions that once characterized Lake Kachee were no longer present, but the people who came looking for the semi-primitive type of recreation were apparently happy with what they found. By the 1940s, use at Lake Kachee had increased markedly and several camping areas had been established by users. Roads were improved and rustic tables and outhouses installed. The area, now much more developed, appealed to people looking for some of the conveniences of modern living. Most were apparently happy with what they found. In response to rapidly growing recreational use and the increasing impact on resources, the Forest Service further modified the area in the early 1960s. Camping areas were expanded to nearly 200 sites. Paved roads were developed in the campgrounds. New camping areas were constructed to handle travel trailers and larger camping vehicles. Campers seeking modern kinds of camping opportunities came in ever-increasing numbers and were apparently happy with what they found. Recently, the access road extending some 5 miles from Interstate 90 was widened and paved. Second homes and other development occurred along the shores of the lake. The area is 80 miles or an hour and a half from Seattle. Over time, the area evolved from a primitive area into a developed area with modern conveniences. The experience changed. Those seeking a more primitive experience were displaced and moved elsewhere. The Kachess model effect is fairly straightforward. Use increases. Qualitatively, use is how use occurs. For example, low-impact camping practices may reduce impacts and increase the carrying capacity. Quantitatively, use refers to impacts resulting from the number of users. More use results in more impacts. Increased use impacts carrying capacity and potentially degrades the resource. When use exceeds limits of acceptable change, either use needs to be limited or the site hardened to allow for increased use. Next, carrying capacity is increased, with management responding by hardening sites and building facilities. Facilities and site hardening changes the experience. User groups change with the changing experience. The cycle can repeat itself. Or the cycle can be ended using the recreation opportunity spectrum to design the opportunities provided by the resource to conform with one of its experience levels. Also, the cycle can begin at any stage. The experience at Lake Kachee began to change with upgrading of the logging roads. They provided more access and increased use. In the center of the model is the bifurcated relationship of recreational opportunities provided by managers and sought by users. The foundation of Clark and Stankey's model and the Kachess Effect is the bifurcation between the recreationist's desire and the opportunities provided by managers. There is a symbiotic relationship between managers and recreation users where managers design the resource to deliver potential experiences and users need the resource to perform their activity. The recreational opportunities provided by the resource leads to user satisfaction and experiences which provide benefits to individuals and society. Clark and Stankey advanced the forerunner of the modern version of the recreational opportunity spectrum. They identified criteria to assess the resource and to manage it to create the desired experience. These were access, non-recreational resource uses, on-site management or modifications, social interaction, acceptability of visitor impacts, and acceptable regimentation. The factors were observable, measurable, controlled by management, related to recreationalists, and characterized by a range of conditions. Based on the assessment, they classified the assessment into 4 classifications. These were modern, semi-modern, semi-primitive, and primitive. The recreational opportunity spectrum can be used to assess the resource and to manage it to create the desired experience. ROS can be used to assess and classify the resource. Using a photo in the campground as an example, access to the campground is 5 miles from the interstate and is easy to moderately difficult at best. The road is single-lane paved, designated for motorized vehicles, and uses well-established roads. Determining compatibility with other uses is difficult, but the lake is subject to significant drawdowns. There is a moderate extent of modification. Apparentness is primarily natural appearing, somewhat complex, and with small comforts and conveniences. There are frequent inter-party contacts. The forest in the campground is mature, well-established, and doesn't show much impact from use. The degree of impact of the campground is moderate and over several hundred acres rated as broad. Campground regulations suggest moderate regimentation. With most of the rating falling within the semi-modern area, the campground is classified as semi-modern. Conversely, the campground can be managed to conform to the criteria in the semi-modern category by changing factors. Each of the following bridge designs suggests designing the bridge to create a different ROS user experience. The laminated bridge illustrates a modern experience. With its uniform dimensional logs, this bridge on the Appalachian Trail illustrates a semi-modern experience. The hand-hewed logs on this bridge illustrate a semi-primitive experience. The stepping stones or no bridge at all illustrate a primitive experience. With the impoundment of the Kachess River and the resulting change in use, over time the experience changed from a primitive experience to developed recreation. This video pays tribute to Clark and Stankey's story, as well as serving the basis for the Kachess Effect model. The Kachess Effect describes a process which leads to increased development and a change in the experience offered by the resource. The recreation opportunity spectrum is a tool which matches the recreation opportunities provided by managers with the resource needs of the recreational users. It can be used to assess the opportunities currently available, and conversely, it can be used to manage the resource to provide an experience consistent with the ROS assessment criteria. The ROS is a useful tool to limit the Kachess Effect and prevent unfettered development. It helps to design the experience.